So hi and welcome to Aiming Without the Tank. By the end of the video we will have refactored all our aiming code so that aiming still works, and we'll have broken a bunch of dependencies. Our diagram will be looking like this by the end. Notice that the tank is almost extracted from the equation and we've lost at least a couple of dependencies. We've lost the lines from the AI controller and the player controller into the tank, which is good news. So see you in there. So we are good to go on this aiming refactor. So just before I start and set you into a challenge, I want to get rid of this annoying log entry. If you remember in the tank blueprint, we've got a couple of logs that we'd put in to do with the construction order. I'm going to get rid of that on the tank blueprint construction script and this print string in the event graph and just recompile and just make sure that if we clear the logs now and move and hover over these things or play the game, that we only get what we want, which is just this one error here about the barrel, which is to do with firing, and we are going to ignore for now. Okay, let's get to it. In fact, I'm going to challenge you to go ahead and aim without the tank. Move just the aiming code from the tank. Remember that we were going to keep a copy of the launch speed in the tank so that the firing, so that all the inbound calls and all the code in the tank still compiles. The firing doesn't work, but the code needs to compile. Move any forward declarations and includes that you need to, and just check that all tanks can now aim, even though we're not doing the aiming via the tank anymore. So go ahead, pause the video, see if you can make that part of the refactor now. Okay, welcome back. So I'm going to use actually my raw slide here, just as a way of keeping track of what dependencies we've broken as we go through. So where do we start then? We need to, as I say, get rid of aiming on the tank. So let's start at the top of the tank.h. Does it need a tank aiming component? Well, it shouldn't need a tank aiming component. Let's just see where we use that in the current document. We use it here. We keep a pointer to the aiming component, so that can all go. The protected section of the tank with this aiming component pointer can go. Do we use this anywhere else? Nope. So now the forward declaration of utank aiming component can go. In the tank, let's talk about the same thing, the tank aiming component. Let's do a find without case sensitivity and see what we need to get rid of. Do we need to be finding the tank aiming component? No, not anymore. That was just to get us to green. We're going to get rid of the AIMAT method altogether. And that is the only reference to tank aiming component, so we can remove the hash include for tank aiming component altogether from the tank CPP. So what have we just done in terms of dependencies? We have just got rid of this dependency. The tank no longer depends on the tank aiming component. That is cool news. So let's just take a look at what code changes I've made, because I appreciate that a refactor video like this can be a little bit hard to follow. So what I need to do is just save all in Visual Studio, pop into the code tracking tool, source tree here, and just show you that in the tank.h, let's start there. This is the changes I've made on the screen on the right hand side there. Deleted those lines. And in the tank CPP, I've deleted those lines. Okay, fantastic. Let's carry on with this refactor because we have definitely more work to do. We need to get to compilation as quickly as possible. In the tank header file, we had an aim at method. That is the thing that we are wanting to move into the tank aiming component. So let's cut the aim at and make sure that it already is in the tank aiming component. Now it is, but look, the signature is different. And the reason the signature is different is because the aiming component used to need to know the launch speed that was stored on the tank. But now we're going to have a copy of the launch speed right here on the aiming component. So let's go get that. Here's our tank aiming component. Sorry, our tank, and here is our launch speed. Let's put that in the aiming component. No, don't need the to do to say remove it, because this is going to be the only place it ends up. Now, what happens is when we call AIMAT, we don't actually need a launch speed. That's going to affect things upstream, right? That's going to affect the AI controller and the player controller, but we'll fix that in a second. Well, it will affect them a little bit. It won't affect the signature because they never did call into tank with the launch speed, but they do need to get the aiming component. We'll see that in a minute. The basic point is we're moving the AIMAT over into here. And then let's take a look at the tank aiming component and its AIMAT method. We just need to change its signature. Okay, so there's a start. Now, at this point, I would say let's compile. Let's see what's not going to work. I can anticipate what's not going to work. For example, the AI controller and the player controller are going to have problems trying to call into the tank right now, I think, but because there's no AIMAT method in it. But let's use the compiler to help us find what's wrong, and we can just start going through its issues. So AIMAT is no longer a member of tank. There you go, in the tank player controller. Let's go sort that out. Now, to sort that out, I'm going to do the player controller, you're going to do the AI controller. Well, I say that, if you haven't already done this challenge, I'm giving you a second chance, which is I'm going to help you by doing this with the player controller, and then you can pause the video as a second chance at the challenge if you need it, and you can do the AI. So what's happening in this tank player controller? It goes and gets the controlled tank. Now, what does get controlled tank do firstly? I think it's a really thin method that does almost nothing. Yeah, it just returns the pawn, and it actually doesn't need to cast this pawn to a tank because a tank is a pawn. So we can remove the cast, and in fact, while we're at it, let's look for a tank in this document. Where else do we use a tank? It's the only place we actually use the a tank type. So because I've removed the cast, I can actually get rid of the hash include tank.h in the tank player controller. What does that do for our dependencies? It gets rid of this line here. Progress. Okay, that's cool. So let's go look at the tank player controller CPP. Do we also have a tank? Sorry, the tank player controller header file. I'm just going back to the header file because I was just in the CPP. We have a tank. Yeah, where are we using that? Let's find it. In this get control tank. Let's ditch get control tank. I'm ditching the method altogether and the forward declaration. Again, that is because we've broken this player controller to tank link. This is good. This is progress in the right direction. So we don't even need a get control tank method. We can just get pawn when we're supposed to be getting control tank. So let's get rid of this method altogether. And in the header file, which we've already just done, I think. Yep. Now let's go search for get controlled tank. Like so, and then say, well, where do we use it? Well, we use it up here. We go and get an aiming component up here and begin play, and then we go and find it, and then we ensure we have it, and then we report that we found it. We do that at begin play. We want to do exactly the same thing every time we aim, and the reason we need to do it every time is because we may have depossessed the tank. We may have died and depossessed the tank. So we want to do something very similar to this. So instead of get controlled tank, it's just get pawn now in this instance, and that should fix that bit. And then down here, we want to do a very, very similar thing. In fact, I'm just going to use this code here and put it straight in here. We find the aiming component the same way inside the aim towards crosshair. If we don't have it, we return. Otherwise, we don't need to get the control tank aim at. We just need to say aiming component aim at. So hopefully that makes sense. Let's reuse the compiler to help us with where we are. And once it compiles, I will show you the source control changes again so you can catch up. By the way, if you're having trouble following what I'm doing in a big refactor video like this, remember that you can always go to github.com/Unreal course, click on Battle Tank, click on the commits here, or go to this URL, which I will paste in the lecture resources for you, and then you will see the next video, BT76, but let's imagine it's already there. You can see all the changes by clicking on it. Okay, so that's that. Now let's go back to Unreal, see how far we've got. Where's Unreal? There it is. Compile failed. Let's find out why. So this error is an interesting one. In the tank player controller 21, it's talking about missing a pointer type. Let's go look at it. It's actually a bogus error. It's got a problem at line 21 because when I deleted whatever I deleted here, what did I delete there? Let's look at the source control. In the tank aiming player controller.h, I deleted something. Yeah, the get control tank, I forgot to take the U function annotation with it, so that's what's confusing it. Let's get rid of that. Perfect. Now let's try the compile again. So that's a strange sort of error. You see the error is telling you it's expecting a pointer type, whereas it's actually just reading a U function and then expecting something below that it's not seeing. So it's a bogus error. You get a lot of these bogus errors. Let's try compiling now, see how well we've done with our code changes. We have another compile failure, so AMAT is not a member of ATank in the tank AI controller. So here is your second mini challenge. We seem to have done it okay for the player controller, it's at least compiling. Let's see if we can get the AI controller, if you can get the AI controller to do exactly the same pattern as we just followed with the player controller. Go ahead, pause the video, see if you can get that working. Okay, welcome back. So the tank AI controller, firstly, it includes a tank.h. We don't want that. Remember over here, we don't want the AI controller including the tank, so I remove the hash include. I'm also going to go to the header file and say, do I really want the tank in there? It's not in there, so we're good. So we can focus in the C++ file of the AI controller. We, remember, don't need these casts. In fact, we can't even have these casts now that we've removed the hash include. So a tank is a pawn, so we don't need to change the type. We can do all these operations on a pawn perfectly well. So we ensure Well, let's use our normal pattern. If not ensure player tank and controlled tank, then return. And what this means is all of this code now doesn't need to be in braces, doesn't need to be indented, Shift-Tab to take them back, much simpler. Okay, so we move to the actor, and then we say control tank aim at the player. Well, it's not the control tank that we do that with, is it? It is the aiming component of the controlled tank. So we're just going to say auto aiming component equals controlled tank find component by class utank aiming component. Now we actually need to create a dependency here because we want the AI controller to depend on the aiming component. So we're going to do a hash include that we didn't have before. It's one of the green lines on our graph. That's pretty cool. So now it will recognize utank aiming component when it catches up with us. So we go get the aiming component, and then is the aiming component aim at that we do. Now, control tank fire. Fire wasn't working before. We don't expect it to work now, but it should be okay. Fire should be still a method. No, it's not. It's not a method on a pawn anymore, because remember, we removed the tank include. We were casting from pawn to tank. Pawns don't have a fire method on it. We're not trying to fix firing. Firing doesn't work anyway. We comment it out, and we put a to-do, which is fix firing. Okay, we're focusing on aiming. Let's recompile. Keeping the scope of these things down is really important. Notice how long these videos would be if I wasn't breaking it into stages for you. And each of these videos represents you sitting down between a couple of cups of coffee or green tea or whatever you drink. And we want to keep these small. So aiming's working. Aiming is working. Awesome. Let's see if we've got any new errors on our console. We actually haven't even got any errors on our console now because we're not trying to fire, because I just commented out that that fire line in the AI controller. We have aiming working under the new architecture, which is fantastic news. If you look over on our diagram, look how good a job we've done. We've nearly decoupled the tank. We're still working. We've still got these two things talking to the projectile. Great news. This is a perfect time to just go into your project, save all, close it down. What do we got here? Graph is linked to a private object in an external package. Try and find the chain references, may take some time. The tank blueprint failed to save. This happens sometime. It's okay. That's not the end of the world. There isn't anything too valuable in the tank blueprint. What I would be tempted to do is save what you can here, not the tank blueprint. Close down your Visual Studio. Oops, I've just reopened it. And then reopen your tank. But just before you commit, if you get an error just before you commit like this, then open it up again. Oh, I know why. You know why? I had 2 copies of the Unreal Editor open. That's what the problem was. You can actually get that in Windows. You see them here? So only have one of these open. Let's just make sure that our aiming works. It does. If you want to be super sure, you compile to make sure you're compiling on the latest code. You can see that it is. The tank blueprint, it's saying that it's got a problem. Let's compile it. And now we really are happy. Save all. Another useful bit of value there. 2 editors open can lead to weird errors. And let's commit our work because we've done a great job. See you in the next video.